go ahead and get started so we can have a lot of time for conversation. Thank you so much for joining us for our Thursday webinars. We've been doing these since April if uh, you are new to this. And what we wanted to do is try and help nonprofits as we were going through COVID. And we did one series in the summer and it was so fun. We decided to extend through the fall. So today we are really going to focus on some giving results, which is great because it will allow us to sort of reflect on how donors are feeling and maybe our own perceptions about whether or not people were giving. And then we're going to have a discussion around donor relations. And we're so fortunate to have some alum with us and to do that with us today. Just real quickly, if you haven't been with us before, our Center for Nonprofit Philanthropy, we are committed to trying to build a vibrant nonprofit and philanthropic sector in Texas and beyond. And we do that through research, professional outreach, and engaged learning. So what that really means is we're looking to work with organizations through outreach and do training. And our professors, we are so pleased that we've got such a diverse and experienced faculty that they're doing great research and trying to learn new things about the sector. And we also are expanding our educational opportunities. So you can see in the bottom left, we've had the master's degrees and nonprofit certificate, but now we're actually starting continuing in professional education, and Dr. Kenny Taylor is leading that for us. So we have a new certificate if you'd want to look into that, or if you need any sort of certification and continuing ed points. So this is a new place for us to be in and sharing our knowledge and working with nonprofits. So please reach out if you have any questions. And of course, we'll be happy to take them at the end of this too. Let me go ahead and introduce our guest. I'm Angela Seaworth. I have just joined and the center now about 6 months ago, but work as Director of Philanthropic Initiatives and Capacity Building. So I love doing training and I've spent most of my life doing that and working as a fundraiser. So I am an ACFRE, and fundraising is dear to my heart as far as being one of the most important, strategic points in managing an organization. I have done donor relations as a chief development officer, but I have not held a specific donor relations position, which is why I reached out to two of our alum who have both worked in the field, and we're going to let them share their experiences with you. So first we have Nicole, and she is the donor relations advisor with Texas Children's Hospital. So it was great because she was able to be on sort of the ground floor of building that office and works to really implement strategic stewardship campaigns for that organization. And since it's such a large one, there's a lot to be learned from for sure. But she's been able to see some dramatic improvements over her work. You can see in her bio that she's seen a 200% increase in stewardship touches. So by implementing that, we know that their donors are hearing from the hospital and certainly feeling grateful. And just recently, I'll embarrass her, she was named a 40 under 40 honoree by the Association of Healthcare Philanthropy. So we're really proud of that work, the work that she's doing. And also with us is Cody Smith, and she's class of 18, so one year behind Nicole. And she has currently is working as a development associate with Rebuilding Together in Washington, D.C. But Cody is focused on individual fundraising. And so I love that. I always tell people to start their career in annual giving and individual giving because it will teach you everything you need to know. I've enjoyed getting to know Cody because she's got such a strategic mindset on how we segment our donors and how we tailor our messages and talk with them. So she's got a lot of knowledge to share with us. Prior to her current position, she worked as the Associate Director of Stewardship with the LSU Foundation, and also was a donor engagement intern with the Texas A&M Foundation. So she's been able to really have a variety of experiences with donor relations, everything from basic gift acknowledgments to more complex donor reports. So I think they're going to help us cover the gamut, and we'll see what they can share with us about best practices and also what they've learned from being part of the Association of Donor Relations Professionals. So today I'm going to sort of frame our conversation a little bit because when COVID hit and we started doing these webinars, we were worried. organizations, one of the first things were, one of the first questions I was getting anyway was, do we keep fundraising? So our answer was yes, that we do, but we had no idea how people were going to respond. And so we said, now's a good time to maybe shift from the solicitation mode to a different aspect of the fundraising cycle and really focus on stewardship. Let's reach out to our donors, let's cultivate and thank people during this time of uncertainty until we figure out what's going on. When can we go back to work? All those questions we had in May and even into June. So we're fortunate that we have now some data that we can share with you to sort of reinforce what we think about and what we said about fundraising. And I think it's important for us to understand there are a couple different ways that we track giving data. So within philanthropic studies research and nonprofit research, we look at a longitudinal view, and that's something you may have heard of called Giving USA. That's an annual report that comes out, and it finishes up in December, and then it takes us about 6 months to write that, okay? Because we need time to analyze it and put it into the subsectors. So that's annual, and so it's really important over time. But it doesn't necessarily help us know what's happening like right now that we're, all of a sudden we're hit with COVID, what are donors doing? So the other piece, this is when this comes into play, it's called the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And this is a data set that allows us to have real-time data. And that's what I'm so excited to share with you today. I've just joined the board of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, and I'm so honored to do it because I'm working with people who've been in the field for 40 years and people that I just really respect. So I'm excited to learn more about it. But what I can tell you is that the Fundraising Effectiveness Project isn't new. It doesn't get as much play. We're working on that, but it has been around since 2004 as a partnership between the Association of Fundraising Professionals and the Urban Institute and their Center for Nonprofits. So we have been at this for quite a while now, over 15 years. And the most recent addition to our work is Giving Tuesday. So we're partnering with them. And what that allows us to do is to see their giving data. But that is just being added to the database we've already developed with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. So I'm going to share a little bit about that. Essentially, we have 8 different database and nonprofit vendors that share their data with us. So for example, if an organization uses Donor Perfect is part of our partnership. So we can see day to day, if we wanted to run these reports, how giving has changed. So that's the difference between sort of the way we look at giving long-term through Giving USA and then what we're trying to do with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. We have a lot of different things we have that we're doing to try and help nonprofit development shops run more efficiently. But this data project is super exciting because of what it can tell us in real time. So today, what I'm going to share with you is our second quarter reports. So this is giving, you'll see up in the top, we have it labeled that it's from January until June of 2020. And what we're using for this is the database that I shared that's coming from 8 different databases and combined into one. But we have data from over 20,000 organizations. And that's where we're trying to find this. So over time, we actually have gifts of over $80 billion and donations that we can get in and analyze. So that just shows sort of the breadth of what this is. This is definitely a big national sample. And some of the highlights, I mean, it's all good news. Just to let you know, first quarter, we did see giving dip this year, actually. It dipped 6%. But by the second quarter, we increased to 7.2% as far as the number of donors. So we saw almost a 13% shift from January until June. So that tells us people are giving, even though we're worried about COVID and there's a lot of uncertainty. One of the things that was most exciting about this is if you look at the donations from that year to date, we're at 47% of giving that came in the second quarter. So that's showing us that people are giving more this year than the year prior, which does really reflect our generosity and that we see in our country. When times are tough, people step up and give. So we're seeing that that has definitely happened. But what's exciting, besides this 12-point swing that I've mentioned, or almost 13-point swing in giving in the first 6 months, we saw a couple other things. And most notably is the increase in the number of donors who made gifts of $250 or less. That increased by 19%. And it's the largest jump that we've seen since we've started using this, database to track. So it's super exciting, but what it also tells us is we need to learn about those donors and what's happening. So in the last 5 years, this second quarter has shown the highest number of donors and the highest number of donations in 5 years. So it shows that people are truly stepping up, and we should indeed keep with our fundraising, even our annual fund appeals, that we need to continue to reach out because donors are responsive right now. A couple other quick things is that you can see the number of, this slide's telling us some information about our donors and retention. We're learning that donors are giving to the organizations they have supported previously. So while we do have new donors, and you can see that we have almost 12.6% of new donors that have come in during this time period, look at the donor retention. Last year, we didn't retain a lot of those donors. It dropped to 8.6, which was a little startling. But what's interesting here is the repeat and recaptured donors. So these are folks that have given to us, skipped a year, and now that we're in COVID, they came back and they're supporting the organizations that they trust, that they know and trust. And that's really the message that we can take from this. And you can see too, as far as at the bottom of this page, just to let you see that we are at 56% as far as number of percentage of donors year to date. So it's showing that people are giving earlier than in the year than they have in prior years. Here's just a little bit more on our donor retention. What we're seeing is that, again, there was an increase in the number of repeat donors, even though we had lost a lot of the first year donors from 2009. So what's happening is that we're seeing that these metrics are showing us again that stewardship and donor relationships matter, because when somebody who wasn't necessarily that closely aligned to your organization, when times were tough, they came back to the organizations that they knew and that they were hearing from. And that's what donor relations is really all about. Here, the last piece is just showing that we really need to be thoughtful about how we use our giving ladders, because we see this enormous spike in the number of people who are giving at the 250 level and below. And there are some organizations out there who feel that they should start their donor giving levels at 500 or 1,000, for example. I've actually worked with an organization that they started their giving levels at $1,000. And I was able to, by implementing a traditional giving ladder with 100, 250, 500, then 1,000, to allow people to move up that donor level, we were able to move 997 donors from giving less than $100 to 100 or more in 1 year. And that was the only thing that we changed. So these are some lessons, that just best practices that some organizations aren't aware of, that donor stewardship really takes seriously. And we think a lot about that. The other thing that this slide tells us that I think is super exciting is it shows that it's not just gifts coming in under 250. We've seen increases over last year and during the second quarter for both our mid-level donors. So those are the folks from 250 to just under 1,000, and then major donors for 1,000 and above. You'll notice they've jumped 8% and 6% respectively. So people are giving. So everything we said back in April when we hoped we were right, saying keep soliciting, keep doing fundraising, what we're seeing is that that absolutely is what we should be doing. But now we need to make sure we know how to take care of all these donors that have come to us. And I'm going to kind of turn this over to our donor relations experts and just moderate their conversation and let them share with you what they've learned. So, Nicole, would you like to tell us a little bit about the Association of Donor Relations Professionals? And
Absolutely. So the Association of Donor Relation Professionals is an organization for donor relations professionals to join and really have a community to share best practices, ideas, new concepts. I know that with COVID, it was a very, this word, pivot to virtual events. And I believe we have over 2,000 members. And right now, and I'll share this link later, we offered a stipend to attend the international conference that was held traditionally in September, but this year due to COVID, instead we offered membership fees. So that application actually closed in September, but I believe they will be reopening that application, and they feature wonderful webinars that just discuss different aspects of donor relations. And they have a great message board where you can ask very detailed questions about planned giving, about annual reports, and different proposals. And you receive wonderful feedback from your peers.
And this is one of the professional associations that people who've worked in fundraising for a long time aren't as familiar with. So I encourage you to look into this. As I've worked with the leadership at that, at ADRP, they've been fabulous. And so they also believe in the copy and steal everything that we joke about within development. There are only so many ways to say thank you. So if someone has a good idea, we definitely, make that our own. So, yes. But it is a really fantastic network of folks. Mm-hmm. And now I'll just see if the two of you could talk a little bit. I think Cody had some really great insight on this as well about what we think about with donor relations, because sometimes we hear major donors and they get perks and they're treated differently, but that's not really what we're trying to do with donor relations. So Cody, could you talk to us a little bit about the distinction and what we're really trying to achieve?
Yes, most definitely. So when it comes to donor relations, it's the core of it is truly to make all donors feel included, known, and appreciated. So one way that you can think of this is imagine yourself as a steward on a commercial airline, and your donors are your passengers. So you have people in first class, business class, and coach. And each of those groups may receive certain or different perks like extra blankets or premium foods. But, regardless of their section, all passengers should be met with the consistent and intentional care. So in all of it and how you approach donor relations, there's definitely going to be some variation according to your size, your mission, your institution. But again, the key is to make sure that we're inclusive and not exclusive.
Absolutely. And the more that you can make your donors feel welcome and part of the family, the more likely you are to get them to these milestones that we talk about of wanting to keep donors for 3 years in a row. And if you get them to 5 years in a row, you almost have to offend them for them to not give, right? we train them to give to us. And so that inclusivity, I think it's something that we have as a value at the Bush School and within our center in general. But we like to make sure that people who are new to fundraising understand that that's really what this is about. And it's about us all understanding that we all have a role to play and we're all welcome as we move forward with mission of an organization. Cody, would you like to go ahead with the Steward?
Yes. So first, when we look at best practices, segmentation is very important. So segmentation, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this with your donors, but some common ways are, definitely giving level, as well as how they were acquired. So whether they were a volunteer or they they came across your website and gave there, or it could even be affinity. So again, that could be their volunteer programs that they're specifically interested in, community outreach or education for your organization. But But in short, just in terms of segmentation, it's making sure that you know how and what drew the donor to your organization. And that provides a lot of information for you and how to cultivate them. Cultivation, this is, again, when you're beginning to identify what are those very specific things that garnered their interest. And again, this is just giving them invitations, inviting them to join your cause, join your mission, join the activities that you have going on. So right now, a lot of that's going to be virtual events, but you can also, send communications for them to receive your newsletter, follow you on social media. And this is, again, just increasing their involvement and awareness. And then stewardship, this is what happens once they have actually given a gift. This is to communicate, this is to communicate with them and just, again, going along with what their needs are is, so for example, if they gave online that you're doing email communications, if they wrote a check, people definitely still write checks, that you are communicating with them in that way.
That's a really great example. I'm so glad you gave that, because one of the last shops that I've worked, intricately with in developing the foundation for all these practices, they had a lot of people who felt comfortable with mail. They wanted print copies of things. They wanted to write their checks and send it in. And they had a nice automated thank you that as soon as the gift was processed, the donor CRM pushed out a thank you and a gift receipt. But a lot of these folks weren't looking at their email. So they were missing that stewardship step, even though the organization had planned it. So it's really important for us to listen to our donors and communicate with them the way they want to be communicated with. And I think the other thing, as the three of us were talking just the other day, and we came up with a couple of good examples about the segmentation piece and how you have to think about how a donor is specifically related to your organization. So for example, there might be a couple who, maybe the husband went to A&M and the wife went to Rice, and they give generously to both. But how do they like to be spoken to from each university? Perhaps engineering isn't really their love, even though the husband has a degree in engineering. Perhaps they love the humanities. So you have to think about that. And it's particularly challenging when you get into educational institutions, because you have that. Or like my husband and I were, we met in business school and we're married, but we like to give to different things at that school. So you have to make sure and understand when you've got sort of multiple affinities within an institution, why they're giving. Within the healthcare, I'm sure Nicole can give us some examples of how that's a little more streamlined, because we think about, grateful patients. Right?
Yes. I also wanted to quickly mention the beautiful maroon text box about listen to your donors, survey your donors. And this does not have to be a formal printed survey that you mail to them. It can be a phone call. If you feel comfortable calling your donor and asking them for their feedback, that is the ultimate way for a donor to show their love, is to ask their opinion. And donors love to give their opinion. Ask for their feedback. I know my vision for endowed fund reporting is to include a small card in the report asking, how does this compare to other endowed fund reports that you receive? Is this the information that you would like to see in your reports? What additional information would you like? Would you like to hear from us more often? I really like asking first-time donors, what is the best method to communicate with you? Do you like social media more? Do you enjoy email more? Or even mail? We're finding now that, we might talk about this a little bit later on, is that we're mailing more things now because people are inundated by emails. I know every day that when I open up my email box, it's full of, just everyone sending emails, multiple emails a day. So now it's a really special touch to send something printed, because now it's the act of walking to your mailbox and seeing, someone sent me a card, or somebody sent me that little touch point of just saying thank you. But going back to with the healthcare system, yes, we're very sensitive to patient information. And we also have a grateful patient donor segment where it is families who have given because they are appreciative to the physicians or appreciative to the hospital for, their life-saving work or for their treatment. And but we are very sensitive about how we address those families and how we also save that donor information in our systems.
Great. We'll transition into a little bit more about different best practices, but I think the main thing that we want all of our guests, particularly if they're new to this idea of donor relations, is to understand the affinity and to listen to your donors first and to know the difference between cultivation and stewardship, because cultivation, Cody gave us a great example. That's really inviting them closer. Stewardship is then thanking them after. So the solicitation is actually what comes between cultivation and stewardship. It's to make sure that anyone who's new understands that cycle and process. But would you guys like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the types of tools that you use with the matrix and CRMs?
Absolutely. Okay, so a stewardship matrix. This is basically breaking down your donors into levels and analyzing, their giving level, and then analyzing what stewardship touches are appropriate for that giving level. So, Cody, how does your organization break down your levels?
Yeah, it's primarily, do you want actual dollar amounts or?
Absolutely.
Right now, we are still very much gathering we're still doing some acquisition. So we're starting pretty low, 1,000 with our first level. And from there, a major gift for us would be about 10,000, which obviously in a hospital, that was probably that's a lower gift for you all. But definitely by giving level, we do have some very important affinity groups such as AmeriCorps. That's actually how I first joined the organization. I was an AmeriCorps member. So that's one of our bigger affinity groups. Also, we have very, very long-standing volunteers. We haven't obviously been able to do that now, but a big part of our organization, I'm at a housing nonprofit, we have volunteer events where we have anywhere from 5 to 20, depending on what work is going on at the home, people working, and again, have people serving 10 plus 15, even 20 years with that as well. So those are some key things that
wow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so those are different groups then that you track within your matrix? Okay, the affinity groups.
So when I first joined Texas Children's, what I did was laid out the stewardship matrix across all giving methods. So we included, events, and then how we stewarded those events donors, and then major gifts, which for us, a major gift is 50,000 and above. And then we did mid-level, which is about 1,000 and above, and then direct mail, Children's Miracle Network, and a few others. And what we did was we basically laid out all these different giving methods and then showed what their giving levels were, and then mapped out what stewardship touches we were doing for each level and for each giving channel. And then that gave us a broader picture of what our overall stewardship efforts were. And then it also gave us an opportunity to look at places that we could gain efficiencies and do process improvements and do our data learning and knowledge from Dr. Kerr. It just gave us a broader picture of what we were actually doing. And it's helping us really fine tune and see areas for opportunity and see where we can plug in additional stewardship touch points. And like our bullet point says, ensures consistency so that we are treating a donor who gives $500 in events the same way that we would treat a donor that gives $500 in direct mail.
That's a great point.
And then
I'm saying real quickly, if it sounds, like it's hard to do this, literally you can do this on a spreadsheet. So you can list
Yes.
You know, in a column, all of your giving levels. And if you want to put event 500 or a specific event there and how you would steward, and then all of your stewardship touches then can be in columns separately, and it literally can be a row across. The people give 250 to 499, and there's a little X under each of these columns. That is how simple this tool can be. You can build it, and it can be really fancy in a CRM system and everything. But for those of you that are just starting, you know, that's a really easy way to think about it. And this is the one thing, like we tell you to communicate all the time with donors. This is the one thing you never want them to see because it looks very cold and calculating and horrifying, right? And so you don't want them to see that if you give $750, you get to talk to 3 people, that people who give below do not get to do that. But what it does is it really saves time. One, the consistency is so important, Nicole, but it allows you, if you're not having to sit down and figure out what have we done to thank this donor today, and especially if you're dealing with volume, if you happen to be in a large organization where you're dealing with, you know, 20,000 donors or plus, there's no way you can do that individually. You need to have this kind of a system. But even in smaller shops, what it allows you to do is to sit down, take care of your stewardship very quickly, check every quarter to make sure you've not forgotten anyone, and then have that frees up hours of time that you can actually be sitting and having personal conversations with donors, which is what we want to get to.
Absolutely. And then tying into the stewardship matrix is CRM. So my organization currently utilizes Blackbaud CRM, and it is a powerhouse. I love it. We are able to store so many details, which we are very careful with PHI, patient health information, and other confidential information. But it just allows you to really schedule reports, schedule touch points. It allows you to send automated messages. And also it houses all of your information. It houses your metrics. So what I do annually now is I build out a dashboard using my CRM data. And if you can see it, but my dashboard includes a 3-year analysis of reporting, like the number of reports sent, the number of, and I break out those reports into categories of stewardship, which is basically just thanking a donor. It's not required by a signed gift agreement. And then endowed fund reports, which are, corpus, and an endowed fund is a perpetual fund that allows an organization to use its distribution on an annual basis. But then I also analyze what our retention rates are, what our average gift size was for that year, and then the number of actual stewardship actions that occurred in comparison to the number of gifts that were made. So the ultimate goal, fingers crossed, is to have 100% donor stewardship, is to have 100% thank yous, reports, and different activities. But yes, a dashboard and CRM will really help facilitate your stewardship activities, because it gives you that analytical background to see, okay, well, who do I need to thank? Who do I need to focus on? Which group is direct mail lagging a little bit? Do I need to focus a little bit more stewardship in that area? And then this screenshot is a sample stewardship plan. So in CRM, you can actually create an automated plan that lays out the 7 touches for you. So it includes the holiday cards, the holiday gifts. It can remind you when you need to make a phone call, or when you need to send a donor an invite. So this year, one of my big focuses is into diving into kind of automating some of our stewardship plans. And if you don't have this tool, you can do individual stewardship plans for your top donors. So like Cody said, if your organization, if your major gift is 10,000, so you would sit down with your team and say, okay, well, who gives 10,000 and above? Let's create a individual stewardship plan for those donors, and then actively make a strategic plan of, okay, well, this is their affinity. This is what they enjoy. This is what we're going to map out for them. So say if your donor enjoys the arts and is really into band. So one of your touch points could be, and say you're either a college or a school, you could send them a video of one of your students playing a piece, you know, either piano or whatever. I've heard of some organizations having a marching band greet a major donor. So it's just, this is a great tool to really keep you focused and keep your stewardship at top of mind. And this even sends you reminders.
Absolutely. And part of what we want to do is free up that time, not just to visit with donors, but to be creative and come up with meaningful stewardship opportunities. So my favorite story is working with a major donor who always wanted to be anonymous. We convinced him that because this institution was new, that he needed to allow us to do sort of this bronze plaque recognizing, you know, him and his wife in our founder circle. It's worked out beautifully now. I went back to the institution not long ago, and we've got almost all of the pillars have founder circles on them. But we said we convinced him he needed to do that as a leadership, you know, move. And he agreed, but I knew he was uncomfortable. So I sat and had to think so hard about what we could do, because he's been giving millions of dollars everywhere. So what could we do that was unique? And he was investing in an independent school. So I called his daughter, asked her not to say anything. And so she shows up on the day it's unveiled, and we actually had his 3-year-old grandson come up and pull off the velvet to show it, because that was part of it, right? Is he wanted to have a school like this one for his grandkids to go to. I got tears on that one. So that's the best. If in donor relations, if you can get major gift donors to a point where they're in tears and they're feeling so grateful and the power of their gift, that's what we try and do. But we want the people who send us $50 every month to feel just as important. And that's what all these tools do. Cody, you want to talk a little bit about what you do with some best practices on our new donors to help welcome them?
Yes, sorry.
I was going to say, you're on mute.
One great thing, you know, is just welcoming them, quote, to the family. So a welcome packet is a really cool way to do that. Previously, when I was at the LSU Foundation, we mailed packets to people, regardless of how they gave. But the cool thing that we included, aside from, you know, it was a folded kind of like postcard. It had thank you language and just generally, you know, thank you for supporting the LSU Foundation. We also included tech tags. So these were stickers that you could put like on your laptop or your phone or what have you. And one of the stickers were the letters LSU. So you could actually put that on your keyboard. And, you know, of course, if you're out somewhere, you know, people can see that you have those stickers. So something that they can kind of like show off or show their membership, their inclusion of the organization is a really cool way to engage donors. And then from there, a really important thing, you know, the premise of donor relations is retention. So after they give that first gift, making sure, again, you know, inviting them to events, having them join social or follow you on social media, start following your newsletter. And again, there's always, it really depends on your organization. When we were meeting earlier in my organization, we have a lot of great email acquisition, but not with addresses. But Nicole had shared that they have a lot of addresses, but not as many emails. So really, again, making sure that you are aware of your organization and what best serves your donors, but a good piece of that also is to try to combine both email and direct mail. It's again, just putting you at top of mind and letting donors remember who you are. Some other pieces too, it's just the administrative part, not always fun and flashy, but it's very important just for tax purposes, one, but also just to make sure that they have a recollection of the gifts that they've given. So that's with the gift receipt, again, with the gift acknowledgement, specifically stating, especially if there is a specific program that they can give to, stating that program, because honestly, you know, things do happen, unfortunately, but so if there is that issue that you can correct it and that you're not saying that they keep giving to the children's fund, really they want to give to something else. And some other pieces, and again, this would depend on your stewardship matrix, but sending out an annual report, obviously with technology, it's really easy for you to just stick that somewhere on your website, but for, potentially for those higher net worth donors, major donors, you could send something to them either via email or direct mail. And again, just think of ways to inform your donors. I think that's a really big piece. We do want to make sure that it's fun and engaging, but you want to make sure that they understand what your mission is and carry them along the journey, especially if there is some pivoting that you're doing or you're revealing a new program or initiative.
Those are great strategies. And, I can say I had a fabulous intern last year, and she's learned a lot about stewardship because she called to thank people. And she could call all day because we were working with a lot of volume, but the organization had never taken time to welcome their new donors. So when we started doing this, we did everything electronically. We sent a welcome packet. It's unbelievable how many people would email back. It was automatically sent out, but they would email back like, thank you so much for reaching out, really feeling like the CEO had spoken to them. And then the phone calls, of course, it was fun. And it turned out another quick example before we send you into breakout rooms to share a little bit is I had one donor that I called who had doubled his gift. And I just called to say, thanks, and essentially ask him, what prompted him to do that. Would love to see more people double their gifts. And he said, well, it just seems like you're trying harder. And that's the most candid thing that I can say is this organization I knew was not stewarding their donors, but to have one say, I doubled my gift because I just wanted to reward you because you're trying harder. You make me feel like I matter. So if nothing else, that hopefully will encourage you to remember what your donors are feeling. Now we're going to ask you to go ahead and talk about the group. So we want to get that, and we might cover a couple of red flags toward the very end of what you don't want to do. But Nicole is going to put us in groups, and would love for you just to talk a little bit about these questions. Whether or not your organization has a stewardship plan, if you've done anything new, and how you reach out and thank donors during COVID, if you have a plan for first-time donors, and then just sharing any great ideas that have either worked for you or you have experienced personally. So we'll be in these breakout rooms for about 7 or 8 minutes. Nicole will bring us back. And have somebody serve as a facilitator, and another person keep an eye on the time for 7 minutes, and have somebody be willing to report when they come back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had fun sharing some of your stories about giving. Donor stewardship specifically. Would anybody like to report out some of the best donor relation stories they have?
Hi, Angela. This is Leah. It's good to see you.
Oh, hey.
Sorry, I don't have my video on, but no, I was elected in the last 2 seconds of our group chat to be our spokesperson. So one of the key things, the key takeaways that we were talking about was just calling donors or even Chamber of Commerce members, if you're a Chamber of Commerce, just calling them to say thank you. And the shock that you get from those donors or those members, that's the only reason you're calling. You're not calling for a donation or anything, but just taking the time to thank them for being part of your organization, as well as asking them if there's anything that they need help with. So that was a key point that I should make more phone calls like that. And then another piece was the importance of the tangible donor experience. One of our group actually works with people, and I'm going to get this wrong, but takes them to Guatemala, which, we can't do that for everyone, but to see in person what difference their gifts make. So it's a little bit harder during a pandemic to do it in person, but making sure that they see the impact of their gifts.
That's a great point. whenever we can show them impact and they can actually feel the impact of their own gift and, and engage them emotionally, that's super important. What about another group? What are some good experiences you've had with donor relations?
I'm with the Sexual Assault Resource Center in Bryan, and our executive director has been extremely good about calling people, emailing people, and cultivating, we're getting the word out as to what our organization actually really does. And I told our group that I had happy news 10 minutes before we started. We obviously are making an impact because we are receiving a personal gift of $50,000. And so people need to know what you do and why you do it and the impact.
Absolutely. Well, and the other reason not to forget the importance of donor stewardship, and I did share this with our group as our conversation evolved, was one of the research studies I did as a practitioner was to look at a university and their top 20 donors. So the top 20 donors in the history of the institution. And what we did was trace back to see what their first gift was to the institution. Guess what? It wasn't $1.5 million out of the blue. All of them started with a gift of less than $100 to the annual fund. So this shows how important it is to continue stewarding donors at every single level, and to make them, really feel like they're part of building your mission and your organization, and then they'll stay with you over time. So quickly, before we wrap up, I know Cody and Nicole wanted to share with us just a couple things not to do. So we have some good ideas from our conversations, but here's some things to avoid. Do you guys want to go through these?
Sure, Cody, do you want to take the lead?
Sure, I can start off. So this is pretty straightforward. Donors are not a monolith. I don't know how you say it's pretty short, but just, it really beware that you're not, even if the person, you have two people, they live on the same street, they volunteer at the same time, they're still different. They have different backgrounds, motivations, and interests. So it's really up to you to figure out what that is. You want to do like back and forth?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to skip down very quickly because this is my pet, and it's my ultimate one is please in your thank yous or in your reports, delete the phrase donors like you. It is my pet peeve because it is in any of your stewardship, you want the donor to feel like the hero. They are the hero. They gave to your organization and they made all of these wonderful things possible. So when you use the phrase donors like you, it's kind of broadening it and it's taking that attention away from them as the hero to anybody who gave, anybody, So donor like you kind of detracts from that specialness of that. And utilize you phrases throughout your report and throughout your thank you to make that donor feel special and thanked. Sorry.
Very good.
No, I say, and I'll jump in with my absolute one, and then we go back to Cody. But make sure that you're cleaning your database and that you have the right titles and you're addressing letters to the right people. So, for example, my doctoral program sent my husband an email thanking him for his generous gift. And, we got a big kick out of it because the title wasn't there. The other thing is, the only reason we gave obviously was because I was part of the doctoral program, but he had a matching gift. So I know in the big database world at the institution, they entered him in as the matching and sort of lead donor. But what happened was they didn't thank the donor, they just thanked somebody else on that letter. So that's an example I like to use. And the other thing is I like to use, if you send doctor and Mr., make sure you have those right. So those are little things that have caught up over time. And also, thanking the correct spouse is just really important. Cody, what's one other one that you really think we should hit on?
Do not assume you know what the donor wants. When I was at the LSU Foundation, we had one scholarship that had over 100 recipients. So I'm thinking, of course, the donor doesn't want, all these student letters, how am I going to compile it? But, it's like, okay, let me just take a pause and go ahead and ask. So I did, and they did want to go ahead and receive all of those student profiles. So, I just got a big binder. I made sure I had a cover letter that was kind of overarching. So looking at how many students from each class, what the top majors were of those students, and then each of those profiles. And it wasn't all 100 because not every student did respond, but it was just, a brief, instead of like the formal letter, we did have like a brief synopsis of those who didn't give us detailed information. So from there, I, had the binder sent through FedEx, and then a couple weeks later, I received a letter from the donor thanking me for that. So even if, in our mind, we're like, oh, I would never want to receive that, it's up to the donor, it's them. And, in sales, there's this ABCs, always be closing. I think in donor relations, it should be always be considerate. Do not assume and ask when in doubt.
That is a beautiful thing to end on. Thank you both for being here today. Hopefully we can get them back sometime and do another session on donor relations and stewardship, because this could be a week-long class, a semester-long class if we really dig into it. But thank you for sharing all of your information with us, and appreciate everyone joining us. Next week, we do have another webinar at noon. It's one of our very last ones, and we're going to hear from the Brazos Valley Gives folks in the Community Foundation. They're going to talk to us about giving days and celebrate a little bit what they've just done, but also teach us how we can do a good job with that. And I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions. I know some of you we need to be mindful of your time. It's 1 o'clock, but if you want to stay on, I'm happy to answer questions till we're finished.
Angela, good job. Enjoyed it. I think this is very helpful. Appreciate the putting it together.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate that.
Yes, Dr. Seaworth, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, and I'll see you next week.
Oh, good. That sounds great.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this session on. It's also great to see fellow classmates and alumni, Nicole and Cody, a part of this. And Dr. Seaworth, so great to see you again after working on trying to get our AFP chapter up. It's amazing to connect with all three of you, and you've got absolutely wonderful knowledge and things that I write down, still take handwritten notes and take with me forever. So thanks, guys.